You have been trying to explain something for years. Not to other people, to yourself. Why a small thing undoes you completely when it should not. Why you cannot sleep even when nothing is wrong. Why you startled when someone walked into the room. Why certain tones of voice, not what is said, just the tone, send your entire nervous system into a state of alert that takes hours to come down from. Why you feel like you are watching yourself from somewhere slightly outside your body. Why the same argument plays on loop in your head at 2 a.m. for the 4th night in a row. Why you cannot stop scanning for what is about to go wrong. Why you feel like you are always bracing for something. Why the smallest conflict feels like the end of everything. Why you cannot just let it go, move on, get over it, be present. You have been calling this anxiety. You have been calling it sensitivity. You have been calling it being too much. You have been calling it a character flaw for so long that you stopped even questioning whether that was what it actually was. It was not. What it actually was, what is actually happening in your brain and your body, has a name. It is called Complex PTSD, and it did not come from nowhere. It came from what was done to you, specifically, repeatedly, over an extended period of time, by someone who systematically, whether they knew it or not, created the exact neurological conditions that produce it. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what CPTSD is, how narcissistic abuse specifically creates it, what it does to your brain, what it does to your body, and why the fact that you cannot just get over it is not a weakness. It is a neuroscience. Stay until the very end, because the last section of this video contains something nobody says directly to people who have CPTSD from narcissistic abuse. Something that changes not just how you understand what happened to you, but how you understand what happened inside you. Let me start with something you need to understand. PTSD, the kind most people are familiar with, comes from a single traumatic event: a car accident, a natural disaster, a violent attack. One terrible thing that the brain stores as overwhelming and unprocessed and keeps returning to. Complex PTSD is different. It does not come from one terrible thing. It comes from repeated terrible things, from a pattern of harm that went on long enough, weeks, months, years, that your nervous system stopped treating it as an emergency and started treating it as normal. The most terrifying thing about CPTSD is not the individual symptoms. It is that your brain adapted to something that should never have been normal. It wired itself around a reality where danger was constant, where love and cruelty arrived from the same source, where the person who was supposed to be safe was the source of the threat. And that wiring, that specific neurological adaptation to chronic relational trauma, does not simply unwire when the relationship ends. It stays, running, long after the person who created it is gone. Now let me show you exactly how narcissistic abuse creates it, because this is not vague, this is specific. The first mechanism is chronic unpredictability. A narcissistic relationship is fundamentally unpredictable, not because the narcissist is randomly cruel, because the same behavior that was rewarded yesterday is punished today, because the rules change without announcement, because the version of them you get on Tuesday is completely different from the version you got on Monday, and you cannot find the variable that explains the difference. Your brain, designed to predict, to create patterns, to establish cause and effect, was given a system that could not be predicted. And a brain that cannot establish predictability cannot relax. Ever. Because if you cannot predict when the threat is coming, you have to assume the threat is always possible. And that assumption, that chronic, low-level, constant assumption of possible threat, is what we call hypervigilance. And hypervigilance is not a mood, it is a neurological state. Your amygdala, the threat detection center of your brain, running at elevated activation levels for so long that it has recalibrated to treat ordinary situations as potentially dangerous. A raised voice, a certain silence, a particular expression, someone seeming slightly distant. These things, to your nervous system, are not neutral. They are signals, and your body responds to them before your thinking brain can intervene. Heart rate increasing, muscles tensing, breath becoming shallow, stomach dropping. Not because you are overreacting, because your threat detection system was trained, through repeated exposure to genuine threat, to respond to these cues. The second mechanism is the cycle of idealization and devaluation. The narcissistic relationship does not stay in cruelty.
That is what makes it so neurologically devastating. The cruelty is punctuated by warmth. The coldness is followed by connection. The devaluation is interrupted by moments of genuine love or something indistinguishable from it. And that alternation, that specific, unpredictable cycling between warmth and harm, does something to the brain. It produces intermittent reinforcement, which means the brain does not learn that the relationship is harmful and stop seeking connection. It becomes addicted to the cycle. The warmth after the harm becomes a neurological event, a flood of dopamine and oxytocin that is more powerful than warmth in a stable relationship because of the contrast, because of the relief, because of the survival-level gratitude of the threat passing. And that addiction, that specific neurochemical bond, does not dissolve when the relationship ends. It stays in the body, looking for the source of the relief that was also the source of the harm. The third mechanism is the systematic dismantling of your reality. Gaslighting, at its core, is not just lying. It is the sustained, repeated denial of your perception. Your direct experience told you something happened. You were told it did not happen. Your direct experience told you you were being treated badly. You were told you were too sensitive. Your direct experience told you what you saw and heard and felt. You were told you were wrong, misremembering, making it up, crazy. And when this happens repeatedly, when the external reality you are told consistently contradicts the internal reality you are experiencing, something happens to your relationship with your own perception. You stop trusting it. You begin to approach your own experience with doubt, not as a rational philosophical position, as a survival adaptation. Because in a relationship where trusting your perception caused conflict and doubting it provided temporary safety, the brain learned which one to default to, and it defaulted to doubt. And that learned doubt of your own experience, that specific, trained inability to trust what you actually perceive, does not leave when the gaslighting stops. It stays, in the form of second-guessing every reaction, in the form of needing external validation before you believe your own experience.
in the form of the constant, exhausting internal jury that convenes whenever you feel something and demands evidence before it will allow you to trust the feeling. Now I need to stop here and speak to you directly, because I know what is happening right now. You are recognizing things you have been experiencing for months or years and calling by other names. The hypervigilance you called anxiety. The difficulty trusting your perception you called being irrational. The intrusive thoughts you called weakness. The emotional flashbacks you called overreacting. And something is happening in your chest right now that is both relief and grief at the same time. Relief because there is a name for this. Grief because of what the name means. What was done was serious enough to do this. I need you to stay with both of those things, because both are true, and you are allowed to feel both simultaneously. Now let me show you what CPTSD does to your body specifically, because this is where most people are most confused. Because the effects are not just psychological, they are physical. Your nervous system exists in a state of chronic dysregulation. The sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight, activated far more often than it should be. The parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest, your sense of safety, not returning to baseline the way it should. This chronic state has physical consequences. Sleep disruption. Not just difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying in the lighter phases of sleep because the nervous system cannot commit to dropping vigilance even in sleep. Digestive problems. Because the gut and the nervous system are directly connected, and a dysregulated nervous system produces a dysregulated gut. Chronic tension, especially in the shoulders, jaw, neck. The body holding a bracing position that it forgot to release. Fatigue that is not explained by how much you slept, because hypervigilance is exhausting in a way that sleep does not fully repair. Physical responses to psychological triggers. Heart racing, breathing changing, nausea arriving in response to something that looks small from the outside, but the body reads as danger. This is not psychosomatic in the dismissive sense people sometimes use that word. This is your nervous system doing exactly what it was adapted to do, in a context where that adaptation is no longer necessary. But the body does not know the context has changed, because nobody told it. The fourth thing CPTSD builds is emotional flashbacks. This is the symptom most people do not have language for. An emotional flashback is not a visual flashback. It is not a memory playing like a video. It is the sudden, overwhelming return of a feeling. The specific emotional state you were in during the abuse. The shame, the smallness, the terror, the desperate need to make it stop. Arriving in the present moment. Triggered by something that resembles, even slightly, the original trigger. A tone of voice, a particular kind of silence. The feeling that someone is disappointed in you. The sense of having done something wrong without being able to identify what. And in the emotional flashback, in that specific flooding of the present with the emotional content of the past, you are not a rational adult who can remind themselves they are safe. You are back in the state, full body, full nervous system. Back in the moment the original wound was created. And then you come out of it, sometimes minutes later, sometimes hours. And you look around at the ordinary situation that triggered it, and you cannot understand how something so small produced something so large. That is not you being dramatic. That is your nervous system responding to a present moment cue that matches a stored threat signature. It is doing its job. The job is just no longer needed. Now, what actually helps? The first thing is the most important. Name it. Not as self-diagnosis, as recognition. What you have been experiencing has a name. It is CPTSD. It is a normal response to abnormal, prolonged, relational trauma. It is not a character flaw. It is not evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with you. It is evidence of what was done to you. And naming it, precisely, accurately, without minimizing, is the first step toward working with it rather than against it. The second thing is understanding that healing CPTSD is not about talking about the trauma until you feel better. It is about regulating the nervous system. The thinking brain can understand what happened, but the nervous system needs to learn it is safe now through repeated, embodied experience, not through insight, through safety, over time, in the body. This is why connection with safe people matters. This is why somatic work, movement, breath, body-based practice matters. Not because you need to relax, because your nervous system needs evidence. Real, repeated, physical evidence that the context has changed. The third thing is working with the emotional flashbacks specifically. When one arrives, when you feel yourself flooding, the most helpful thing is not to analyze what triggered it. It is to orient. Look around the room. Notice 5 things you can see. Feel the ground under your feet. Notice the temperature of the air. Not because this is a magic cure, because orienting to the present moment gives the nervous system present moment data. And present moment data interrupts the signal that the past is happening now. The flashback is lying to your nervous system. Orienting is telling it the truth. The fourth thing is understanding the difference between healing and getting over it. Getting over it implies the experience should be erased, transcended, left behind. Healing implies something different, that the nervous system can learn to return to baseline more quickly, that the flashbacks can become less frequent and less overwhelming, that you can develop the capacity to recognize when you are in the past and return to the present, that you can build a life that is not organized around the threat that no longer exists. That is not getting over it. That is learning to live in a nervous system that was shaped by something it should never have had to survive. And that work, slow, non-linear, patient, profoundly worth it, is possible. It is happening in people right now. People who looked exactly where you are now, who had no language for what was happening inside them, who called it being too much, who called it a character flaw, who had not yet heard the word that would change everything. And now, the thing I promised you. The thing nobody says directly to people who have CPTSD from narcissistic abuse. Here it is. The fact that you developed CPTSD is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence of duration. CPTSD does not develop from a single, overwhelming event in most people. It develops from prolonged exposure to a relational environment specifically designed, consciously or not, to produce it. The unpredictability, the cycling, the reality denial, the systematic erosion of your perception of yourself. These things, sustained over time, produce CPTSD in the vast majority of people who are exposed to them. Not because those people are fragile, because those conditions are designed, whether the designer knows it or not, to break down human nervous systems. The question is not why you developed CPTSD. The question is, why would anyone expect you not to? You were in contact with one of the most psychologically damaging relational environments that exists for an extended period,
without adequate support.
and your brain and body adapted to survive it. That adaptation, the hypervigilance, the flashbacks, the dysregulation, kept you functioning inside something that should not have been survivable. It was not a flaw. It was competence. And it still is. The work now is not to undo what the adaptation did. It is to teach the system that the context has changed, that the threat that required this level of vigilance is no longer present, that it is allowed, slowly, with support, with enormous patience, to learn what safety feels like. You survived something that would have broken most nervous systems. You are not too much. You are not fragile. You are not permanently damaged. You are a person whose nervous system did exactly what nervous systems do under sustained threat, adapted to survive, and who is now in the early stages of learning that survival mode is no longer required. That is not a small thing. That is everything. If this video gave you language for something you have been experiencing and calling by the wrong name, please share it with one person who is still calling their CPTSD, anxiety sensitivity, or being too much. Tell them it has a name. Tell them it is not their fault. Tell them what was done was serious enough to do this, and that does not make them broken. It makes them someone who survived something serious. Subscribe, because this channel exists to give you the neuroscience behind what happened to you, so you can stop blaming yourself for surviving it. I will see you in the next one.